Hey guys, my name is Iasmina and welcome back to my channel. So about 2 years ago, I think almost 2 years exactly, I made a video called 5-Star Predictions, where I tried to pick out books I thought at the time I would give 5 stars, based on their description, on the genre, on similar things that I had read. Now I will link that video up here and down in the description if you want to watch that first before you watch this video. But in this video I will do a wrap-up of all the books that I mentioned in that video and tell you what I thought about them and if they received the 5 stars from me or not. And if not, why not? So let's get started. Now, in my previous video, I kind of had a theory that when I was a bit younger, I used to be more generous with my ratings and I used to give 5 stars more often than not. If I really liked a book, I would give it 5 stars. In the same video, I mentioned that in the past few years, I feel like I haven't really given that many 5 stars to books. I've given a lot of 3s, a lot of 4s, but not 5 stars. And maybe my reading tastes have changed and maybe I've become a bit more picky with what I give 5 stars to, but after looking at the pile of books that I have right now to talk about in this video, and I said I was gonna give all of these 5 stars, that didn't happen. So I do think my theory was correct in that I have become a lot more picky and a lot more less likely to give 5 stars to books. Even when I really like a book, I feel like there's always something in it that could have done better, and so I give it a 4, like a 4.5, even though Goodreads does not have half points in my head, it's like a 4.5. Anyway, yes, let's talk about the books. First book I'm going to talk about is Eona, the sequel to Eon by Alison Goodman. The reason I said in my previous video that I was going to give 5 stars to this was that I gave the first book 5 stars. I will also link my wrap-up video in which I talked about this book, because I think I went into more detail there. But yeah, I did not like this book. I gave this 2 stars. That's very far away from 5 stars. Honestly, if I were to go by Goodreads terms, 1 star means I didn't like it. 2 stars means it was okay. I didn't like it. So I might have to even downgrade this to a 1 star, which on Goodreads this has an average rating of 4.11, which is quite good, but I thought this book was so problematic. Like, it had a lot of problematic elements to it. There was a very, very problematic and strange love triangle in it that, in my opinion, should not have been there, and that was one of the main plots of the entire book, and I just could not stand it. And also, it was just kind of boring. Not much happened. I remember the first book being so fun, and it's inspired by Chinese mythology, and that I remember that first book being so much fun, and it had so many cool elements to it that before that I hadn't really seen in fantasy books. I did not like the sequel. Thankfully, it's also the last book. It's a duology. But since this was, I think, the first book that I read after I made that video, it was a clear sign that that video wasn't going to end well. As in, I was not going to give 5 stars to most of these books. Anyway, moving on. The next book I'm going to talk about fared better. This is The Unseen World by Liz Moore, and on Goodreads this has an average rating of 4.11, and I ended up giving this 4 stars. It was really, really good, but it wasn't 5 stars good for me, and I don't know what that means. I think I know what that means. When I read a book, when I finish a book, I know what 5 stars is for me personally. And this just fell flat a little bit. It just wasn't quite a 5 stars, but it was very good and I would definitely recommend it. This is sort of a thriller / literary fiction novel. It's beautifully written. It's about this girl who grew up with her father, who is a very famous scientist. This is set in the 80s, and so in the 80s, her father is working with an AI software. So he's built this AI software that he has very, very big plans for, but at the moment it is used as a chat bot program, and he's using it to try to teach it to behave like a human. And he also makes his daughter is called Ava, who is the main character in this book. He also teaches her how to use the program and talk to it every single night so that it can teach it how to respond more like a human. But in the beginning of the book, Ava's father develops Alzheimer's, and it sort of deteriorates from there. But because of her father's Alzheimer's, he kind of starts disappearing from her life, and this is kind of the story of how she copes with that. But in the midst of it all, she finds a floppy disk with a hidden code that her father left her there for her to decipher, because they also kind of played this game where he sends her different ciphers and she has to decode them and find the meaning, and it's a lot of fun between them, but she finds a very, very difficult code in a floppy disk. We kind of follow her trying to decipher that code. It was very good, beautifully written. It definitely held a kind of atmosphere that I really liked. It just wasn't quite 5 stars, but regardless, very good. Next up is another literary fiction novel. I think it's classified as literary fiction. Correct me if I'm wrong, but this is Eleanor, Oliphant is Completely Fine by Gail Honeyman. Now, I thought I would give this 5 stars because of the voice. I started reading the first page, and also the description made it sound very funny and very relatable. And boy, was I not expecting what I got with this book. So on Goodreads, this has an average rating of 4.28, and I also gave this 4 stars. I did really enjoy it, but this was harrowing, and it was very different than what I expected. I expected to laugh and relate to this main character. In very many ways, I'm glad I didn't relate to this main character. Let me just say that. It definitely had its funny, quirky moments, but this is a very different story than what I thought I was getting into. I don't even know how to describe this. This main character has a lot of issues. She's a recluse, and we follow her making one of the first friendships of her life throughout this book, and we also follow her trying to get better because she is very, very sick. And in the beginning of the book, you don't know why or how she's sick, but then you kind of find out the more you read. I'm having flashbacks right now with scenes from this book. Yup. I would totally recommend it. It was very enthralling. It was just completely different than what I expected. And to be honest, I feel like the back also kind of misleads in a way. So let me just read you this passage, because for some reason I thought it was memorable enough to tab it, which I very rarely do. Some people, weak people, fear solitude. What they fail to understand is that there's something very liberating about it. Once you realize that you don't need anyone, you can take care of yourself. That's the thing. It's best just to take care of yourself. You can't protect other people however hard you try. You try and you fail, and your world collapses around you, burns down to ashes. Like I said, this character is very much a recluse. She does things by herself, and I could definitely relate to parts of that. So in some ways it was definitely relatable, in other ways nope. Next book is Stormfront by Jim Butcher. This is the first book in the Dresden Files urban fantasy series, and on Goodreads this first book has 3.99 average rating, and I gave it a 3 star. So, Dresden. What can I say about Dresden that hasn't already been said? This is a very popular series. It's also a very short book. There's a ton of books in the series. I think they're up to 13 or 14. I've only read the first one. I like urban fantasy. I like this kind of setting. He gets into a lot of trouble, the main character, Harry Dresden. I like that a lot. Don't particularly like his character though. And I've talked about this I think in one of my wrap-ups, which I'll try to find and link down below. But I don't like the main character. I don't like Harry Dresden. He's very misogynistic, the way he describes women. Ugh. But I liked everything else about it. It is funny. And he does get into a lot of ridiculous situations. And it is sort of a detective story, you know, set in an urban fantasy world. So I like the whole premise. And people do say that he gets better, he grows as a character throughout the series. So that's kind of the reason why I'm planning to continue after all. In this first book, I wasn't a big fan of Harry Dresden, but I liked everything else. That's why I gave it 3 stars. definitely not 5 stars. This character, oh my god, this character. it was so annoying at points. Next book, another fantasy series, and that is, well, the book is called Dance of Thieves by Mary E. Pearson. This is a YA fantasy series, and the first book has a 4.27 average rating, and I again gave it 3 stars. This was a bit disappointing to me. I don't think I've talked about this yet in a video, but I will do in a wrap-up of my recent reads soon. But again, this fell short for me. Oh my god. I don't understand. I don't know what it is. If my standards are just a lot higher these days, but a lot of these books fell a bit short. So, this is actually really well written. I really love the voice and the way this was written. It's very snarky and very immediate and clean. Like, there's not a lot of bloat to this book, which I really like, because in a lot of fantasy you tend to get a ton of bloat with the writing, but this was very clean and I really like that. I also like the characters. I think my main problem with this is that it's a romance story and it basically just focuses on the romance and not much else. In fantasy, although I totally am okay with a romantic subplot, most books have a romantic subplot, that's fine with me. But this felt like this was a romance story set in a fantasy world, which it might just be. But that's just not what I expected. It is an enemies to lovers arc, so if you're into that, I think that's done pretty well. And it's dual point of view from the two main characters. The girl is a thief, a very good one, and the boy inherits the sort of throne. Yeah, I don't want to spoil much more than that, but again, it's more of a case of I expected this to be more fantasy and more magic. Basically had no magic. This is a very low magic world, and it was definitely a romance book just set in an alternate fantasy universe. So if you're into that, totally recommend it. If you're not into that, I'd give this one a skip. Next up is a graphic novel, the only one in this pile, and that is Giant Days. Volume 1 by John Allison, Lisa Treeman. This has an average of 3.96 on Goodreads, and I gave this a 4 stars. I definitely enjoyed it. It was a lot of fun. It was a quick read, obviously, because it's a graphic novel. It's about these characters' first year at college, so it's more of a sort of upper YA target audience. It's just about that, really, that, you know, they get into a lot of shenanigans, and the characters are very funny. It was just sort of a day in the life type of comic. It was fine. I liked it a lot. I would recommend it as far as graphic novels goes. Just wasn't quite a 5 star for me. Alright, now the next book. How should I begin? Okay, never mind. Let's just go for it. The next book is Shadow of the Fox by Julie Kagawa. I predicted to give this 5 stars. On Goodreads, this has a 4.01 average rating, and I gave this 4.5 stars. Okay, 4.5. In my head, it's a 4.5, even though on Goodreads, it's 4 because Goodreads really needs half stars, okay? In case you're new to my channel, I love this series. This is one of my new favorite fantasy series. I've read the entire trilogy. This is the first book. I will link my entire series review of this. I gave this first one 4.5, but I gave the other two big 5 stars. Like, this is now one of my favorite series, so I did not give it 5 stars, but on the average I gave the series 5 stars, and so it was actually a success. I just had like a slight problem with this first book, but the other 2 books in the series totally just knocked it out of the park, and so this, I think, was the first real success of the books in this video, because I adore this series so much. Oh my god. If you haven't listened to me talk about this series, I've talked about this series so many times on this channel, but in case you're new, this is a Japanese mythology-inspired YA fantasy that reads like an anime. It is incredible. It's about the main character who is a kitsune and another guy who is a samurai, and they're trying to save the world together, and there's so many things that get in their way, and it's all fantastic, and it's super fast-paced, really quick to read, beautifully written, just the right amount of everything. I love this series so much. This was a success, for sure. Even though I didn't give this first book 5 stars, it was very close. And this series as a whole is incredible. And the last book I'm going to talk about in this video, how many books was that? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7? So there were 7 books, 8 with this one. From these 8 books, I only gave one book 5 stars. So, my predictions weren't they... Yeah, I don't know why this is the case. Anyway, I did give one book 5 stars, and that is Ship of Magic by Robin Hobb. Oh my god. I have filmed a review of this. I will put it in the cards and down in the description if it's already out by the time you're watching this video. It should be. This is the only book in this entire video that I gave 5 stars to. Even though the other one was close. My god, this book. This is amazing. This is high fantasy at its finest, for me at least. This has an incredible magic system, an incredible cast of characters. It's just done so well. Robin Hobb is such a good freaking writer. I love everything I've read from her. I have not been disappointed by a Robin Hobb book yet. This is the first book in the Live Ship Trader series. It is set in the same world that the Fits and the Fools series is set, but it follows a completely different cast of characters from a completely different part of the world. And it mainly follows the Vestrid family, and the Vestrid family own a live ship. And what a live ship is a ship that comes alive. It's in the name, really. Basically, there are these ships that are made of wizard wood. And what that means is that the head of the ship comes alive after 3 generations of the same family who owns it die on board of the ship. So the ship sort of absorbs the remnants of the people who died on it in a very weird way. Sounds a bit gross if you think about it, but basically they absorb the remains of the people who die on it, and they sort of absorb their personalities, and they become a member of the family, and they are alive. It is a very, very cool magic system, and I think it's done really well. But we basically follow the multiple POVs of the members of this family, and we mostly follow the children's perspective, who are sort of growing up, and it's sort of a coming-of-age story of the children, but we also follow some of the adults. And I talk about it more in my review video, but yes, this is a success. This is amazing. I love this. I need to read the other 2. It's also a chunker of a book. It has about 900 pages, but I loved every single page of this. So of course, I would highly, highly recommend Ship of Magic. So this is the pile of books that I predicted I was gonna give 5 stars to. I only ended up giving one of them 5 stars. One of them was very close. There was some 4-star reads, to be fair, which are pretty perfect, and you know, in my book they're almost perfect, right? And then there's some 3 stars, and actually, now that I think about it, a 1 star as well. Basically what I learned from this experiment is that I need to get better at predicting things. Just because a book sounds like it's right up my alley, just because it sounds like it's fantasy and it's gonna be amazing, doesn't mean that I will like it as much as I think I will like it. Yeah, I think I'm definitely more picky these days when it comes to rating books and when it comes to giving 5 stars. I definitely give a lot more 3 and 4 stars than I do 5 stars. Clearly, as you've seen from my ratings in this video. I will have a new video predicting 5-star reads. Hopefully that I'll have more success with that. I'll be extra careful picking those books. But that was it from my 5-star predictions, results, and wrap-up. Do let me know down in the comments section if there was ever a book you thought you were gonna give 5 stars to when you first picked it up, and then you ended up really not liking it and giving it 1 or 2 stars. Because of course, like 3 or 4 rating is actually a pretty good rating, but a 1 and a 2 isn't really that good. And in my case with Eona, that was definitely not good. But otherwise, that was it for me today, guys. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a great day, and I'll see you next week with a new video. Bye!